Wagwan, everybody. Welcome to the Dis Affamie History podcast, where we'll be speaking about history and as well family history and how history relates in terms of Caribbean people for the present as well as in the past, and how in the past what that does and brings forth for what we are going through at present and what we can learn from our history, from our family, and take that moving forward. So I do hope you enjoy the podcast. And if you like it, please ensure to subscribe, like, and review. Thank you.
DNA and what every Caribbean person should know. For generations, you've heard the stories your family tells about where you come from. Stories of Africa, Europe, and maybe even Asia. But what if the story written in your DNA is even more complex, more surprising, and more resilient than you ever imagined? History books try to tell us our story, but now a simple DNA test is unlocking secrets we thought were lost to time, and it's changing everything for Caribbean people searching for their truth. This isn't just about seeing percentages on a screen. This is about finding a history that survived against all odds right inside of us. For so many of us with Caribbean roots, our family tree has gaps, and not just small ones. We're talking massive, gaping holes, pages ripped out of the brutal history of colonialism and the slave trade. Our ancestors were scattered, their names were changed, their language forbidden, and their family lines deliberately broken. The paper trail just goes cold after a few generations, leaving this deep feeling of being disconnected. We know we're people of Africa, Europe, and the Americas, but the specifics, they're not always a mystery. Who were they really? What were their names? From what actual soil did our roots grow? This isn't just some personal frustration. It's a collective ache. A shared longing to fill in the blanks of a story that was stolen from us. For centuries, we were defined by the colonizers' narrative. Stories that called our Indigenous ancestors instinct and painted our African ancestors as one single group, erasing the incredible diversity of cultures and kingdoms they came from. We were handed labels like Black, Mixed, or Creole. But those labels don't tell the whole story, do they? They don't speak of the specific ethnic groups, the individual journeys, or the sheer resilience of the people who came before us. This broken past is a deep and shared pain point for our community, a hunger for a story that is finally our own. But there's one thing, the library of our lost history isn't completely gone. The most detailed history book ever written is actually stored inside every single cell in our body. That's the promise of modern DNA testing. It's a game-changing tool that lets us bypass our burned records and incomplete archives to read the story that was passed down generation after generation in our genetic code. So how does it even work? It's way simpler than you might think. Most popular tests, like those from Ancestry DNA and 23andMe, are autosomal DNA tests. You just send in a saliva sample and scientists analyze the DNA you inherited from all your ancestors on both your mother and father's side. This is the test that delivers those fascinating ethnicities, percentages, and crucially connects you with living relatives you never knew you had. Their huge databases are fantastic for finding cousin matches. Then you can get even more specific, a Y-DNA test, which only biological males can take, traces a direct, unbroken line along your father's side, from your dad to your grandfather to his grandfather, and on for thousands of years. And then on the flip side, the mtDNA, or mitochondrial DNA test, which anyone can take, does the same thing for your mother's direct maternal line. For a lot of Caribbean people, these tests can incredibly be powerful. Your Mitochondrial DNA, for example, might connect you directly to a single maternal ancestor who could be one of the very first people in your family to arrive in the Caribbean, whether she came from Africa, Europe, or the Americas or Asia. And for those of us wanting to connect more deeply with our African roots, specialized companies are now building extensive databases of African lineages. In some cases, this allows them to offer clues that point not just to a region, but to a specific ethnic group your ancestor may have belonged to, like the Mende people in Sierra Leone or the Fula people in Guinea-Bissau. This isn't just science. It's us rebuilding our own history. It's a chance to get back the names, the places, and the identities that were systematically erased. The most powerful part of this whole journey is the reveal. It's the moment you open your results and the story you've been told your entire life suddenly gets bigger, gets challenged, or gets completely rewritten. Here are a few stories based on the kind of profound discoveries Caribbean people are making every single day. Picture a woman from Puerto Rico. We'll call her Maria. She grew up hearing whispers that she had Indo ancestry, but it was always talked about like a myth. The history book said the Taino people, the original inhabitants of the Greater Antilles, were wiped out. Then she takes a DNA test. The tests pop up. There it is, a 15% Indigenous American ancestry. And it's not just some genetic Indigenous DNA. Genetic studies have confirmed that this DNA is a direct link to the ancient Taino people who lived in the Caribbean 1,000 years ago. Maria isn't an exception, she's a norm. Studies show that a huge number of people in Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and Cuba carry significant Taino DNA, often between 4% to 15%. So here's a secret. The Taino people were never truly extinct. They survive, not just in our foods and place names, but in our blood. This DNA proves that their story didn't end. It just became part of ours. Next, think of David, a Jamaican man living in London. All his life, Africa was just a huge, vague concept. He knew his ancestors were enslaved, but from where? The continent is massive. It felt like a question without an answer. He takes a test with a company that specializes in African ancestry. The results point to something incredible, a strong connection to the Mende people of Sierra Leone. All of a sudden, Africa isn't an abstract idea anymore. It's a name, a place, a culture, a language. He can now research the history of the Mende people, their art, their tradition, their fight against slavery. For Caribbean people whose African history was deliberately cut out, this is so much more than a fun fact. It's a homecoming. Genetic studies are now tracing lineages from the Caribbean back to specific regions like Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, Benin, and giving millions of us a chance to reclaim a specific piece of who we are. Finally, meet Jean-Pierre from Martinique. His family has a very proud, clear story. They are descended only from African and French people. His last name is French. The family history is set in stone, but his DNA results show a big chunk of ancestry from South Asia. Totally confused, he starts digging into history and uncovers the story of indentured laborers. After slavery was abolished, hundreds of thousands of people from India and other parts of Asia were brought to the Caribbean as cheap labor for plantations. In places like Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, this history is front and center, but it touched nearly every island, including the French ones. Jean-Pierre's DNA found a forgotten chapter of his own family's history, a quiet ancestor whose legacy was lost to memory but lived on in his genes. It just goes to show you the Caribbean story is one of constant motion and mixing, creating a genetic kaleidoscope that's way more complex and amazing than we ever knew. If any of these stories hit home, if ever you looked in the mirror and wondered about the full story of the face looking back at you, I really hope you take this journey for yourself. This isn't an ad, it's an invitation to find your own unique chapter in this great Caribbean story. Share this with a cousin, an auntie, a friend who loves digging into family history. The more of us who test, the stronger our collective story becomes, and the more secrets can be unlocked together. I put some links to the recommended DNA testing companies for Caribbean ancestry down in the description. So what does this all really mean? It means our identity isn't defined by what was lost. It's defined by what survived. We aren't just the descendants of the enslaved, but the descendants of survivors. We are the legacy of Taino who blended into new societies so their children could live. We are the children of dozens of distinct African nations, each with its own profound history. We are the product of European settlers, some of them colonizers, others are just poor immigrants, and some South Asian laborers who were searching for a better life. Our DNA tells a story of incredible resilience. It shows us that despite everything, our ancestors found a way to survive, to build communities, and to pass their legacy right down to us. This genetic mix is our superpower. It's what makes Caribbean culture so vibrant, so dynamic, and so unique. Are a living, breathing mix of the world's people, all on our small, beautiful island. Recent genetic studies have even started revealing how connected the islands always were, finding ancient genetic cousins on different islands hundreds of miles apart. This science is just proving what our culture always known. We are one people woven from many, many threads. The biggest secret your DNA will tell you is this: history isn't dead and gone. It's alive right now inside of you. Your blood is a living archive, and your genes are a library of stories waiting to be told. The story of the Caribbean isn't about victims. It's the story of an ultimate survivors. It's a story of resilience carved into our bones and written into our DNA. Go and find your story, because in finding theirs, you truly find your own.
Hoped you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and write a review for the episode wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you.